to another episode of Radio KBE. Sorry, I thought I had my mic off for a second, but I didn't. Welcome to another episode of Radio KBE. This episode is going to be on the Lakers head coach search. Before I start, I just want to thank all the folks that have subscribed and the folks that have liked and commented. It does help the channel go a long way, so I appreciate you guys doing that and helping the channel grow. We're up to 150 subscribers, which is pretty awesome. Once I can get to 1,000, I can do more stuff. And I think I've found a decent cadence with these schedules. So I'm probably going to aim towards, doing maybe Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. But we'll see as news drops and stuff like that for how things go. So this episode, we're going to talk about the Lakers head coaching search. And, one of the things I think I've argued a lot on the timeline this past season is that there are two very big culprits, two big focal points involved with the Lakers not being successful outside of injuries. Roster construction; those are all important things. But it's been the conversation about Russ. It's been the conversation about Frank Vogel. So I'm not going to get into Russ because there's not really that much to talk about. And so we don't have to get into that. But I do want to talk about the coaching because I've been pretty vocal about it. And, now Frank Vogel's gone. And we've heard a lot of news sort of come out. When Rob Pelinka was interviewed in his exit interview and asked, what they're going to do and what they're looking for with their next coach, he said stuff about a coach that has a strong presence, strong voice, that sort of thing. And I thought that was interesting because I think Frank is a very diplomatic guy, and I don't think he's a bad coach by any means. I think he has his strengths and weaknesses, and I think one of the things that were I don't want to say it was a weakness, but it was something that he was prone to do. Is he evaluated guys based on their defensive ability, and he would prioritize minutes based on who was playing defense, as opposed to maybe what was going on, what the game really needed, maybe how the team was being schemed against. It was not that he wasn't paying attention to the offense. It's just those sort of small sort of things that made him who he is, which led the Lakers to winning a championship. It didn't necessarily fit with the roster that was sort of currently constructed, and so there's a lot of other stuff that's come out about Frank. There's stuff that we've heard about Russ, about them two being combative with each other, which has been strange because it seems as though both player and coach are being villainized and pit against each other, when really the conversation should have been about the front office. So the reason why I wanted to talk about the head coach search is because this is really, really important. Right now on the timeline, or I mean just right now in general, like the theme of the entire offseason has just been about Russ. It's just been about like, who are we going to trade him for? What are we going to do? And you get all kinds of stuff on the timeline. You get people saying, I don't know if they're Laker fans or if they're player-specific fans, but they'll say stuff like, we hope if he doesn't get traded or if he does get traded that LeBron shouldn't be here or Anthony Davis shouldn't be here, or we should just tear the whole thing down and rebuild. A lot of this sort of screams of, 2 years ago before the Lakers won a championship and people went out and they protested in front of Staples, and they were being goaded on, by the media. You had the Ringer, you had local media telling fans that, they should show up to Staples Center and make a whole mockery. And they were just, those folks, those people were just being mocked. Like they were just being made fun of. So it's like, it feels like a lot of the stuff that's going on with the Lakers right now is in that realm. Like it's media making it seem like incredibly dramatic. Like it's impossible to trade Russ. Like nobody wants him. He has zero value. And then you'll see stuff like, if the Lakers won't even give up a first rounder, or they're not inclined to do it, so that means that he has to come back. Like At some point, I think the fan base has to sort of, for me as a fan, what I do is I try to step back and be like, okay, what's the reality of the situation here? Like, can we trade Russ right now? Are we going to trade him right now on May? When you guys see this, it'll be May 25th. But like on May 24th, 25th, like, are we gonna trade him right now? Like, no. Like, does it make sense to publicly posture and say, hey, we're gonna keep Russ if we don't find a deal that we like? Probably, because then a team that is actually interested in trading Russ for cap relief or whatever it is, because they want to get out of long-term salaries, it may change the way that they want to negotiate or approach the position. And I think one of the things that's really tough about, at least being a Laker fan in social media age, is um, these companies know how to monetize your negativity. Like, they know that if they write the right headline and if they write the right thing, um, you'll panic. They don't even have to source the information. Somebody can go and just write uh, 1,000-word article and just say teams are demanding, and this is not directly at anybody specific because everybody does this. Teams are demanding multiple first round picks for Russ, and it could be completely unsourced. We don't even know if that's actually happening, and you just bang it, and I think the fan base just they're waiting for doom to happen, and I think that's a really tough way to be. I think that's sort of, it's almost like a miserable way to be a fan. And so for me, like I try to be a little bit on the optimistic side, but I also try to be a little realistic, and just think of the situation just with a different lens. Just thinking about it, it there's enough historical record where we know that's not necessarily the case, and we just know that like there's more to it than just what somebody like what some anonymous scout or anonymous GM or anonymous person says to a writer, and so I wouldn't put too much stock in that. Not in the writing, but just in the rumors, because right now that's all you're going to hear. But there is one thing that we do have some real sourcing about, and it's this Lakers head coach search. We know that the finalists that have been mentioned are Darvin Ham, the assistant coach, who sounds like he's the lead guy from everything that we read so far, from Milwaukee, Terry Stotts from the Blazers, and then Kenny Atkinson from the Warriors, all assistant coaches right now. And Terry Stotts, we know him. If you've heard the name, he was Dame Lillard's coach for a long, long time before he was finally let go and replaced by Chauncey Billups. Kenny Atkinson was with Brooklyn for a while, and he ended up being an assistant for the Golden State Warriors. He was coaching Brooklyn the year I think D'Angelo Russell got like his all-star appearance. They had like Karis LeVert, and they had Jared Allen, a bunch of young guys that were on that team. So, not a team that was expected to go far, but they definitely overachieved in terms of like, making the playoffs and stuff like that under his regime. And he's regarded as a really good, player development, good guy for like the youth, the young group and stuff like that. So, Darvin Ham is a person that's in the lead right now. And, for this episode, I just want to I'm mainly going to focus on Darvin Ham because I think, because he has ties to the Lakers, it is a big deal. And I think that does matter because that's very consistent with the MO of what this front office does. They try to get, people who understand what the Lakers brand means, what it means to, just carry yourself as a coach and do it for this franchise specifically, and the scrutiny. That I think that's one thing that we underestimate is that when you coach this team or you're a role player on this team, Pat Beverly mentioned this on one of those ESPN shows where it's like no matter what you do, like if you join the Lakers, like everything gets dissected like to the smallest degree. Like you can play an insignificant role for the Lakers, and if you do a good job, the fan base will, shout your name to the heavens. But if you do terrible, like, you'll get killed on social media. And, those extremes it is what it is, but that's just kind of what happens when you have a very passionate fan base and stuff like that. And I think there is a part of these interviews that involves understanding that if whoever the coach ends up being, they have to be able to withstand the scrutiny of being a coach of this team. Even though Vogel was only here for a couple of years, he didn't, and he won a championship. He wasn't beyond scrutiny, and obviously you combine the fact that it's for the Lakers, and you also consider the fact that it's also you're coaching LeBron. Like it's everything's magnified tenfold, and especially after the season the Lakers had, it's going to be worse in terms of just the expectations. Like I don't think the Laker fans have lowered expectations. I think they expect to contend. They don't expect to just make the playoffs and be happy with that because we missed the playoffs last season or this past season, and then got knocked down in the first round. If anything, when it comes to this franchise, we don't use context at times. Like we use context when we argue with other people of fans from other fan bases when it comes to arguments about us. And I think this is the Twitter thing, but we don't do it internally, and so there are going to be expectations for whoever comes in. And I think Darvin Ham is a coach that he's been an assistant coach for a really long time, and he's sat besides Mike Budenholzer, who has his flaws and stubbornness when it comes to his schemes and stuff like that. But I think one of the good things that that I take from him being considered a lead candidate is that he is a very that the offense that Mike Budenholzer runs, the philosophy that he runs it with, there's a good baseline of offensive, not excellence, but like an offensive baseline. Like there's the shot selection, how they get those shots, the principles behind the offense. Those are all things that are really important. If you watch the Milwaukee Bucks and how they play, obviously they have an all-world generational talent in Giannis, and he has a generational motor, which is something that you do not find. That's very, very rare quality to find, and that generational motor is what allows the Bucks to be very successful in what they do. It doesn't matter what defense Giannis sees; like he's going to try and get to the rim as best as he can, and he's gotten better and better. Even since he's won the championship, he's gradually become a better jump shooter. He's gotten much better with his footwork and getting to the rim and stuff like that. And so this idea, like adding Ham, I'm hoping that it brings a baseline of how we play basketball. Like one of the things that I think has made life very difficult for the Lakers is the way that we've used Anthony Davis on the team. Vogel's offensive preferences didn't involve much motion, didn't involve a lot of pick and roll or anything like that. The Lakers have been one of in the 3 years Vogel was coaching us, including the championship year, obviously. The Lakers were like bottom 5 in pick and roll actions as a team. Like that's pretty significant. That's pretty low. You would think that a team that has Anthony Davis and LeBron James would run it more, not together, but just run it more in general. And that just didn't happen. We were very selective as a team when we ran it. And what felt like the other big chunk of our offense was post ups and isolations, clear out isolations, and it was almost always the left hand side block of the court, and we ran clear outs. And if you have watched this recent Lakers season, like we were running those for Russell Westbrook, and as I was watching, after watching 3 years of Frank Vogel's offense, like at some point, and this was one of the reasons why I was so adamant about changing the coach out, and that it's not just the player's fault, like it does have to do with the coach, was because he was running an offensive system that relied on a 6'10" guy and a 6'9" guy to make decisions out of the post or to win their one-on-ones in the post or in these face-up isolations close to the basket. And then we were asking a player, a 6'3" guard, to step into role. Um, and that 6'3" guard was being defended by wings, 6'7" guys, 6'8" guys. And and then when it wasn't effective, we were getting mad at the player for not being able to do it. And so that was a problem. Like the us trying to take players and ask them to do things that they're not good at, um, or not being able to understand like sort of the writing on the wall with that player, that look, this guy's not as effective if he's put in these positions. I think that hurt the players a lot. There were times this season where we were running, teams would run a zone defense against us, and we would go to Carmelo Anthony isolations. Like some of that stuff, it just there was no easy shot generation, and a lot of times it felt like the shot quality that the Lakers were generating for each other was very difficult. And then sometimes if the shot quality was good, like we wouldn't make them. So it's compounding issues, injuries, and stuff like that too as well. But one of the things that I think, actually, before I go into the next point, the other thing is also, aside from asking players to do things that they weren't good at, I think one of the issues that I thought with Vogel was his style of offense was playing right into Anthony Davis's weaknesses. And I think when the Lakers traded for Anthony Davis, obviously we won a championship, so we won that trade or whatever you want to say. But there are limitations that Anthony Davis has as a player. One of his limitations is his ability to read double teams and to pass out of double teams, like anticipate them. And there's probably nobody better in the league at doing that than LeBron James. And so even when we added Anthony Davis, I was hoping that he would be able to, absorb some of that knowledge and how those reads and stuff like that work. But he hasn't. He's continued to have trouble making reads out of double teams, figure out what angles he wants to attack at. He sometimes has an issue, also with his motor too as well, and how hard he plays and the toll it takes on his body and stuff like that. And so we were running an offense which either involved, because somebody was out and injured, playing guys in roles that we shouldn't have been playing them in. And then when everybody was healthy, we were playing what I would like to call a predictable offense. Like you always knew where Anthony Davis was going to get the ball. You always knew what the play was going to be. There's nothing inventive. We'd run some fake action on the opposite side. And then in the end, it would always just be a face-up isolation. And if Anthony Davis was making his jump shots, or if he was dominating and getting to the rim, then we probably won that game. But if he wasn't, or if he was average or below average, there's probably a good chance that defenses were applauding that we were making it easy on them, and that all they had to do was just sort of stand on their side of the court and wait for him to miss his isolation jumper. And so I think adding a guy like him to the team, and for him to come from a place where even prior to Giannis taking this leap as a player, winning MVP back-to-back and stuff like that, like Darvin Ham had been with Mike Budenholzer in Atlanta, and they had, Atlanta was a team, I think they won 60 games one year, if I'm not mistaken. Like they were a team over there, and they even initially with the Bucks before Giannis took his leap, before they even added Drew Holiday, like they were a team that they lacked the talent and experience to be NBA champions or to make really, really deep playoff runs. But it wasn't for lack of scheme. It wasn't for lack of coming up with ways to get good shot quality for themselves. You can look up frequency and stuff like that when it comes to this sort of thing. You can see how many shots they like to take from the corner, from above the break, that sort of thing. But the style of play, the play style, had a baseline that was a good baseline for regular season basketball. And that's really what the Lakers need. The Lakers need a good baseline of play style for regular season basketball, because that's where we don't want LeBron to get hurt, Anthony Davis to get hurt. If Russ is here or Russ is not here, whoever's in that set, we don't want those guys to get hurt. And having a coach that comes in with not only a voice that the players can trust, as a former player, all that sort of stuff, but also has something that the players will buy into, a style of play that the players will buy into, is something that's important. The other thing is also this. I think I think in order for Darvin Ham's play style to be successful, it'll involve the Lakers having to get more wings, and that's on the roster construction side. That's a front office thing, and I think when you bring in a new coach, especially after the season we've just had, you have to take his input, and I think that's been a big part of like this, the general anger, I would say, that's come from the fan base, that like an inconsistent there's an inconsistent vision between the front office roster construction and what the coach wanted to do, and that's important. Um, Milwaukee has wings. They were starting Wesley Matthews, a guy that wanted to come back to the Lakers, but for some reason we chose not to retain, who is a good wing. Even if at a minimum it's no problem at all. You're always happy to get productive players at a minimum, and having a new voice and having a coach who comes from a place where they generate their shots from attacking the rim, finding open threes, running different kinds of defensive coverages. Giannis gets used as a the Lakers will probably go back to playing two bigs, but having a big more like Bobby Portis as opposed to a big like DeAndre Jordan. Even if it's somebody who's slightly just has a high motor and gets up and down the floor. If you've seen any of my other videos, I talked about how having a high motor big is a big deal, especially next to Anthony Davis, because sometimes he has an inconsistent motor. They have that with Brook Lopez, and they have that with Bobby Portis. Like having a coach who will encourage getting guys like that who can see like how the coaches, how the Lakers need a guy like that, or need guys with good motors and stuff like that. That stuff is important. But I think having that baseline, having a coach who's come in the past 10 years, worked behind and worked with a coach that has a baseline philosophy that works in the regular season, that keeps players involved, that's been successful, and then being able to get LeBron and Anthony Davis healthy in the playoffs and let them do what they do best. Because we know that in the playoffs, everything sort of changes. And we know that in the playoffs, it's more chess match, it's more tactical. And we know LeBron is one of the greatest players of all time when it comes to doing that sort of thing and preparing in a series and stuff like that. So I think if Darvin Ham does end up getting the job, I think that's great for the Lakers. Aside from the intangible stuff, the leader of men and all that stuff that you hear, I think if he brings in the play style that Mike Budenholzer has been running with Atlanta, that's been running with the Bucks, we don't have Giannis, but if you compartmentalize and you start breaking up the things that Giannis does well and start piecing it out to in between LeBron and Anthony Davis in a smart way, I think the Lakers can be successful. The way that Russ, we've heard about people asking, what's going to happen with Russ? Is Russ going to get traded? We've heard about coaches basically telling, not coaches, the front office basically asking the coaches, coaching candidates, like how would they use Russ if Russ were to stay on the team, and this is just kind of dotting their I's, crossing their T's. I think that it's a good question to ask because you just don't know what the end result is going to be, whether he's on the team or not, in whatever capacity he is. But like this idea that like the idea that the Lakers can sort of mimic to some degree what made Milwaukee successful, what's made Milwaukee and those Atlanta teams successful, understand what kind of players they need to prioritize in free agency, give themselves a chance. Like one of the guys that we have on this roster that like I've genuinely thought is in just a bad position as a player just because of who's there is Talen Horton-Tucker. Like I think he's a very talented player. I think he can really get to the rim. He's really good at finishing when he gets to the rim, especially when he gets downhill. He has a very, like Russ actually, like he's much stronger than he looks. And so you have to you can't defend him with small guys. Like you have to defend him with somebody stronger or else he's going to bully his way to the rim. And that's literally what Russ does. But the problem is when you use him, how you use him, putting him in position, like The volume of screens that the Lakers use in a game seems it seems like they almost never screen for each other. Like if you think about how much Laker basketball we watch, if you watch all season, like think about any game where like you remember us delivering really great screens that led to really great looks for their teammates. Like maybe here and there, maybe towards the end of the season when Dwight was on the floor with Russ, like you saw some really great screen action, pick and roll action with Dwight, getting a bunch of high scoring games and stuff like that. It just didn't happen, and that's something that I think a guy like Darvin Ham, when he joins the team, that's something that he'll bring to the team. Um, Understanding the value of screening just for the sake of screening, understanding the value of that being the first action every single time you come down the floor, uh, just to see how the defense responds to it, and then finding your open shooters. Sometimes I think the Lakers, the thing I think that escaped the Lakers, the thing that they were missing is a lot of times in through long stretches of games, they weren't running purposeful offense. They were just kind of running offense. And if you play basketball, you know what I mean. Like they were just kind of coming down and going through the motions. Like they would come down, Russ would ISO, he wouldn't see the play that he wanted. So they'd swing the ball back around, it would turn into like a mellow post up or something like that. Or it'd be like a bailout Braun three on the perimeter. Or it would be like or a Braun mid post action or something like that, with Russ standing in the corner and then maybe screening for each other. Like it wasn't purposeful. It wasn't designed to penetrate the defense or penetrate shell zone coverage and set up a corner three or set up the corner pass to the opposite side wing three. Like there was no purpose to the actions. They were just kind of doing stuff, or they're just hoping that one guy would do something that would cause everybody else to figure things out. And I think having more structure, a coach like Darvin Ham, again learning from Mike Budenholzer. Having a purposeful offense is a big deal. And I think in the regular season, when you have a purposeful offense, it and a purposeful defense, it allows you to build good habits as a team. So that when you go into playoff series and you have a situation where, let's just say hypothetically, I know people are going to groan, like if Russ is on the team and now he's running against a bench unit, like and it's him and Anthony Davis or him and LeBron, like they're running their plays with like purpose. Like they know where the ball is going to go. They know who they're going to set up. They know, hey, if this happens, then Russ take the layup, don't kick it out, that sort of thing. If this is what the guy does on the screen, Anthony Davis just roll to the rim or pop out if they're overcommitting. And if they overcommit, and AD, if you don't want to shoot the jumper, then swing it immediately to the corner and we'll find an open three. So that kind of stuff is a big deal. And coaching matters. I think LeBron is one of the most brilliant players ever, but even like I would imagine even he would tell you that for everybody else, at least for him, he figures it out. Like you can never run the same coverage against LeBron 3 times in a row because each time he'll figure out how to pick it apart. But not everybody's like him. Anthony Davis needs coaching. Malik Monk, Austin Reeves, these guys all need coaching. They need somebody to give them some direction. Some stuff they can figure out themselves, but that's the importance. That's the value of a coach, and obviously accountability and effort and stuff like that matters too. But those are all important things. And I think this Lakers head coaching search, before we do anything, before we decide what we're going to do with Russ, before we decide what's going to happen with the extension for LeBron, before we do anything, and we use our mid-level exception before the draft even comes, like nailing down a coach who coaches with purpose, who coaches to understand and utilize the full like value of a player. Like Anthony Davis can't be relegated coming down the floor to just coming down, running to one side of the floor, asking for a ball, taking a jump shot, missing it, and then running back. Like, it almost feels like a misuse of the player. Like it feels like you're not getting the most out of him. And, bringing in a coach who's watched guys like Giannis, watched guys like Brook Lopez, watched guys like Bobby Portis, watched guys like Drew Holiday, who get asked to do even a guy like Chris Middleton, who get asked to do more than just what they're good at, and are encouraged to do more than just what they're good at because there's value to it. I think that's important. And it's a very cliche thing for us to always talk about emphasizing the little things. And Frank Vogel's done that too. Like like I said, great coach, has his flaws, is what it is. But it's great to emphasize it, but it's another thing to coach that. It's another thing to find it on tape and say, this is like, we need you to do this, right? There's a difference between telling somebody, hey, you missed your assignment here, what happened? Can you explain to me what happened? Because the way the player may respond to it may be different than somebody turning around and telling them, hey, we just can't have this happen. Because if this happens, then this falls apart. So we all have to be connected together. And for all I know, for all we know, Frank was that kind of guy, but he may not have been. And having a new voice where people respond to it in that manner is I think, beneficial. So, we'll continue to see just kind of who ends up being the coach. I like Terry Stotts too as well. I think he's very pick and roll heavy. We probably need a better defensive assistant, a good defensive assistant next to him. I would say Kenny Atkinson of the three is probably the most inventive, if I could use the right word. I've always liked him because I thought Kenny Atkinson did something that nobody expected him to do, and I distinctly remember watching the Nets series. I want to say it was against the Sixers. It was the series where like Jared Dudley was on that team, and there's like this thing that happened, I think, after one of the games where they had like Jared Dudley defending Ben Simmons, and there was like a thing that happened. But the reason why the Nets were in that series, even though Sixers were way better than them talent wise, was because even though D'Angelo Russell had won, or he had gotten the All-Star, that was like the big thing at the time. They were making fun of Laker fans that D'Angelo Russell had become an All-Star, and the Lakers just let him go. But he actually took the ball out of D'Angelo Russell's hands. D'Angelo loved to run pick and roll, and Kenny Atkinson in the playoffs actually gave the ball to Karis LeVert instead. And the reason why was because this is my analysis. I'm not saying D'Angelo doesn't go to the rim. Like, he doesn't like to go to the rim. He's not an athletic finisher at the rim. He never has been. And if you watch this Minnesota series, you've noticed that Minnesota will give the ball to Anthony Edwards because he will go to the rim. He has a mid-range, he has a three ball, but he's an athletic, strong guy, and he's not afraid to go to the rim. And, when Kenny Atkinson did that, that's like sort of the moment where I saw him. I was like, all right, you know what? Like, this guy's coaching the game. Like, he's not coaching the player. He's watching what's happening on the floor and saying, okay, we can't keep doing this. We have to do this instead. And I think Darvin Ham is a guy who will probably do something like that. Terry Stotts may be a coach who does stuff like that. But the Lakers really need that. Somebody who's going to coach the games and not try to turn the player into something they're not. Because that stuff is all subjective. Like, if you had to ask Laker fans, did Russ sacrifice enough to warrant being a Laker, or did he sacrifice enough this season? They would say no. Like, if you asked a writer, they'd say, oh, of course not. Like, this guy has tons of arrogance. He thinks that what he did was sacrificing for the Lakers. But if you had to ask that question to Russ, or if you had to ask that question to LeBron or Anthony Davis, their answer may be a little bit different. Because they see Russ in a different way that fans see him or that media see him. But we need the coach to understand that. Like, the coach has to have that rapport with the rest of the team. So, that's really what I wanted to talk about when it comes to the Lakers head coaching search. There's a lot of stuff that goes on with it that, we're not privy to. And I don't think it's an easy job at all. But there's a lot that goes on with this position for the Lakers. And, even though that they got knocked out in the first round 2 years ago and they missed the playoffs this past season for a multitude of reasons, like, the expectation as long as LeBron's on this team is always going to be a championship. And so when you have that sort of expectation, there's a lot of scrutiny and stuff comes with it. So I'll be curious to see who they end up hiring. I like Darvin Ham. I think he's a great candidate. I've already given tons of reasons about baseline offensive play style and defensive play style and how that can help out the Lakers during the regular season, especially, and get LeBron in. And so, it'll be interesting to see what direction they go in, and what sort of comes with it. But hopefully, it comes sooner than later, so then we can start just kind of discussing what's the right roster that needs to be set up around the coach's philosophy. So once again, I appreciate all the folks who've subscribed, who've liked, who've commented. I read everything. I see everything. I try to respond to everybody that I can, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's on YouTube. This has been really enjoyable for me to do, and I hope it's been enjoyable for you guys too as well. So if you haven't, subscribe, like, share it, and if nothing else, I just want you guys to know that I really do appreciate the conversations, the productive conversations that we have about this team. And if nothing else, I'll see you on the timeline, and I'll see you in the next video.